I wasn't supposed to be home. That's what saved me. My flight from Chicago was delayed by 4 hours due to a mechanical issue, which meant instead of landing at 9 p.m., I walked through my front door in Westchester County, New York at 5:17 p.m. on a Tuesday afternoon. The house was silent except for the hum of the central air conditioning and the distant sound of my husband's voice coming from his home office upstairs. I wasn't the type of wife who eavesdropped. After 15 years of marriage to Marcus Hale, I'd built my life on trust, partnership, and the belief that we were a team. I was the chief financial officer of a mid-sized pharmaceutical consulting firm. He was a successful real estate developer who specialized in luxury condominiums in Manhattan. We had the perfect life, or so I thought. Before we continue, I'd love to know, where are you watching from? Drop your location in the comments below, and if this story already has you hooked, hit that subscribe button and give this video a like. Trust me, you don't want to miss what happens next. I set my suitcase down quietly, slipping off my heels on the marble entryway. I was about to call out to Marcus when I heard her laugh. It was high-pitched, young, and distinctly not mine. My stomach dropped like an elevator with cut cable. "Marcus, baby, I can't wait anymore." The voice purred through the crack in the office door. "When are you finally going to tell her?" I froze at the bottom of the staircase, my hand gripping the banister so hard my knuckles went white. "Soon, Amber." "Very soon," Marcus replied, his voice carrying that same smooth confidence he'd used when he proposed to me 16 years ago on the Brooklyn Bridge. "The lawyers are finalizing everything. I'll serve her the papers next week. She won't see it coming." My heart wasn't just breaking. It was calcifying, turning into something cold and sharp. "And the prenup?" Amber asked. I could hear the rustling of fabric, the intimate sounds of two people who were far too comfortable in my home. Marcus laughed. It was a sound I'd heard 1,000 times, usually when he closed a big deal or won an argument. That's the beautiful part. We don't have one. California is a no-fault state, but New York has this lovely thing called equitable distribution. And because I've been very careful about how we've structured our assets over the last 18 months, she's going to walk away with barely enough to rent a studio apartment in Queens. The room started spinning. I pressed my back against the wall, forcing myself to breathe. "What about her company stock?" Amber's voice was sharp, calculating. She wasn't just some naive mistress. She was a partner in this destruction. "Already handled," Marcus said, and I could hear the pride in his voice. "I convinced her 2 years ago to put most of her assets into a joint investment fund I manage. She signed over power of attorney for those accounts last year when she was swamped with that merger deal. She was so grateful I was taking care of the finances while she focused on work." I had signed those papers. I remembered it clearly. Marcus had brought them to me during the most stressful week of my career, when I was working 20-hour days to close a $200 million acquisition. He'd kissed my forehead and told me he was protecting our future. He was protecting his future. With her. "You're brilliant," Amber cooed. "So when do I get to move in? I'm tired of that cramped apartment in Tribeca." 2 months max," Marcus assured her. "Once the divorce is finalized, this house is mine. It's in my name only. I bought it before we got married. She'll have to leave. And then, my love, we'll finally have the life we deserve, the life they deserve, built on the ashes of mine." I should have stormed upstairs. I should have thrown open that door and confronted them both. But 15 years as a CFO had taught me something valuable. Emotion loses, strategy wins. So instead, I did something Marcus never expected from his trusting, naive wife. I pulled out my phone, opened the voice recorder app, and I listened. I documented everything for the next 43 minutes. Every casual detail of their affair, every financial manipulation Marcus had orchestrated, every asset he'd hidden, every lie he'd constructed. When I finally heard them moving toward the door, I slipped silently down the back hallway, through the kitchen, and out to the garage. I sat in my BMW X5 in the darkness, my hands shaking so violently I could barely hold my phone. I wasn't crying. I was calculating. Marcus thought he was 10 steps ahead. He thought he'd been clever, methodical, untouchable. What he didn't know was that I'd spent the last 15 years as one of the most forensically skilled financial officers in the pharmaceutical industry. I'd uncovered embezzlement schemes, traced money through offshore accounts, and testified in federal court against executives who thought they were smarter than the system. Marcus wasn't smarter than me. He just underestimated me. I waited 30 minutes until I saw Amber's silver Mercedes pull out of our driveway. She looked young, mid-20s, with long blonde hair and the kind of confident stride that came from someone who'd never had to fight for anything. She probably thought she'd won. She had no idea the game was just beginning. I walked back into the house. Marcus was in the kitchen, pouring himself a scotch, looking relaxed and satisfied. When he saw me, his expression shifted to surprise, then quickly to practiced warmth. "Elena, honey, I thought you weren't getting in until late." He crossed the room and kissed my cheek. His lips felt like poison. "Mechanical delay got fixed faster than expected," I said, forcing a smile that felt like broken glass in my mouth. "I tried calling, but you didn't answer." "Oh, I was in back-to-back Zoom calls," he said smoothly, not missing a beat. "You know how crazy Tuesdays are?" I knew exactly how crazy his Tuesdays were. Every Tuesday for the past God knows how long, Amber had been here, in our home, in our bed. "I'm exhausted," I said, setting my purse on the counter. "I think I'm going to take a bath and go to bed early." "You do that, sweetheart," Marcus said, already turning his attention back to his phone. "I have some contracts to review anyway." "I'm sure you do," I thought. That night, I didn't sleep. While Marcus snored peacefully beside me, the sleep of someone who believed he'd already won, I sat in my home office with my laptop and I began to dig. I started with the joint investment fund Marcus had convinced me to sign over. It took me less than an hour to hack into the account. Marcus had used a password I'd seen him type 100 times. Our wedding anniversary, the lazy security of someone who never imagined being caught. What I found made my blood run cold. Over the past 18 months, Marcus had systematically liquidated my stocks, bonds, and retirement accounts, totaling over $4.03 million, and transferred them into a complex web of shell companies and offshore accounts. The money was gone. Legally, technically, it was still ours. But he'd positioned it in a way that would be nearly impossible for me to access in a divorce. He'd also taken out 3 lines of credit against our home. The home he claimed was solely in his name, totaling $800,000. That money had been transferred to an account under Amber's name. He was funneling my assets to his mistress while planning to leave me with nothing. But Marcus had made one critical mistake. One beautiful, catastrophic mistake. When he'd set up the power of attorney, he'd given me reciprocal access, standard practice for married couples. He'd assumed I'd never use it, never need it, never think to check. But that access was still active, which meant I had every legal right to move money, restructure accounts, and make financial decisions on our behalf. Marcus thought he was the chess master. He didn't realize he'd just handed me the board. I spent the next 6 days in a state of controlled fury, living a double life that would have won me an Academy Award. During the day, I was the loving wife, making Marcus his favorite dinners, asking about his day, laughing at his jokes. At night, while he slept, I was a woman at war. I hired 3 people, all of whom came highly recommended through discreet professional channels. First, a forensic accountant named Patricia Chen, who specialized in uncovering hidden assets in high-net-worth divorces. I sent her every document, every password, every thread I'd found. She called me 2 days later. "Elena," she said, her voice tight with professional outrage, "this is one of the most sophisticated financial frauds I've seen in a marriage. But here's the good news. He's been sloppy. We can trace everything." Second, I hired a divorce attorney named Rachel Morrison, a woman with a reputation for annihilating unfaithful spouses in court. She was expensive, ruthless, and exactly what I needed. "Don't file yet," Rachel told me during our first meeting in a coffee shop 40 minutes outside of Westchester, where no one would recognize me. "Let him file. Let him think he's in control. We'll use that arrogance against him." Third, I hired a private investigator named James Corrigan, a former NYPD detective who now specialized in infidelity cases. I gave him Amber's license plate number, which I'd memorized from her Mercedes. James called me 3 days later with a file that made me sick. Amber Sinclair, 26 years old. Former paralegal at Marcus's real estate firm, fired 8 months ago for, wait for it, attempting to embezzle client funds. Marcus hadn't just hired her back privately. He'd installed her in a luxury apartment in Tribeca that he was paying for with my money. She had a record, 2 credit fraud charges in her early 20s, both settled out of court. Marcus hadn't just betrayed me with an affair. He'd partnered with a criminal. If you're as shocked as I was, go ahead and hit that like button right now. And make sure you're subscribed to Moments with Her, because next part is going to blow your mind. On the 7th day, Marcus came home with flowers, pink roses, my favorite. He kissed me softly and told me he needed to talk. My heart was hammering, but I kept my face perfectly neutral. Elena, he said, sitting down at our dining room table with the kind of serious expression he used when discussing property contracts, I think we need to talk about us. Here it was, the moment he'd been rehearsing. I've been doing a lot of thinking, Marcus continued, reaching across the table to take my hand. His touch made my skin crawl. I don't think this marriage is working anymore. I think we've grown apart. I think it's time we consider separation. I let the silence hang there for a moment, watching him. He looked almost sympathetic, like he was doing me a favor. Separation, I repeated, my voice small, broken, exactly what he expected. I think it's for the best, Marcus said gently. We can do this amicably. I've already spoken to a lawyer. We can split everything fairly. I don't want this to be ugly, Elena. I still care about you. I pulled my hand back slowly, letting a single tear roll down my cheek. I wasn't acting. That tear was real, but it wasn't sadness, it was rage. How long? I whispered. How long? What? Marcus asked, his brow furrowing slightly. How long have you been planning this? For just a fraction of a second, I saw something flicker in his eyes. Calculation, then it was gone. Elena, there's no one else if that's what you're asking. This is just about us growing in different directions. I nodded slowly, wiping my eyes. Okay, I said quietly, if that's what you want. Marcus looked almost relieved. He probably expected more of a fight. I'll have my lawyer draw up the papers, he said. We can keep this simple. Simple, I echoed. Yes, let's keep it simple. That night, Marcus slept peacefully again, and once again I didn't sleep at all. Because what Marcus didn't know, what he couldn't possibly know, was that in the 7 days since I'd overheard his conversation with Amber, I had moved $6, $2 million into protected accounts he couldn't access, restructured our property holdings, filed a formal complaint with the New York State Bar about his attorney's conflict of interest, and sent a comprehensive file to the IRS about his offshore accounts. I'd also done something else. Something that would become the nuclear option. I'd contacted Marcus's 3 biggest real estate investors, the ones who'd trusted him with over $40 million in development projects, and I'd quietly informed them about the $800,000 that had gone missing into Amber Sinclair's account. I didn't accuse Marcus of anything. I simply provided documentation and asked if they were aware of the transaction. They weren't. Marcus had 5 days before those investors started asking questions. 5 days before his entire empire began to crumble. But I wasn't done, not even close, because Marcus thought divorce was just about splitting assets. He thought I'd cry, maybe hire a mediocre lawyer, and eventually accept whatever scraps he offered me. Marcus had forgotten who he married. He'd forgotten that I wasn't just a wife. I was a woman who'd spent 15 years dismantling corporate fraud for a living. And now, he was my next case. The divorce papers arrived on a Friday afternoon, delivered by a courier in a manila envelope. Marcus wasn't home. He told me he had a business trip to Boston, which I knew meant a romantic weekend with Amber at a boutique hotel I'd already identified through James's surveillance. I opened the envelope slowly, reading through the petition. It was masterfully written, painting Marcus as the reasonable party seeking an amicable dissolution of a marriage that had naturally run its course. There was no mention of Amber, no mention of the hidden assets, no mention of the affair. He wanted the house, 70% of our liquid assets, and he was offering me a laughable $3,000 a month in temporary maintenance for 1 year. After 15 years of marriage, he was offering me pocket change. I took a photo of every page, sent it to Rachel, and then I did something Marcus never anticipated. I called his mother. Want to know what happens next? Next part is coming, and trust me, you do not want to miss the moment Marcus realizes what I've done. Make sure you're subscribed to Moments with Her and hit that notification bell. Drop a comment below telling me, would you have confronted him immediately or played the long game like I did? Calling Marcus's mother was tactical, not emotional. Victoria Hale was 72 years old, a former federal prosecutor, and the single most formidable woman I'd ever met. She'd built her career dismantling organized crime families in the Southern District of New York, and she had zero tolerance for dishonesty, especially from her own son. The phone rang 3 times before her crisp voice answered. Elena, darling, what a lovely surprise. Victoria, I said, my voice steady despite the earthquake happening inside my chest. I need to talk to you about Marcus, and I need you to listen to everything before you say anything. There was a pause. Victoria Hale didn't become one of the most respected prosecutors in New York by missing subtext. I'm listening. I told her everything. The affair, the financial manipulation, the shell companies, the $4.03 million he'd hidden, Amber Sinclair's criminal record. The divorce papers designed to leave me destitute. I sent her the audio recording I'd made, the financial documents Patricia had compiled, and the investigator's report on Amber. When I finished, the silence on the other end of the line stretched for what felt like an eternity. Then Victoria spoke, and her voice was ice. That foolish, arrogant boy, he's just like his father. Marcus's father had been a real estate developer who'd been caught in a massive fraud scheme when Marcus was 19. Victoria had divorced him within a month and rebuilt her life from scratch. She told Marcus 1,000 times, never become the man who destroys the people who trust him. I'm filing a response to the divorce petition on Monday, I told her. But I wanted you to hear it from me first. Because this is going to get very ugly, and I need you to know that I'm not the villain here. You're not the villain, Elena, Victoria said firmly. You're the prosecutor. And I taught you well, didn't I? All those dinners where we talked about white-collar crime, about tracing money, about building airtight cases. She laughed, a sharp sound. Marcus never paid attention, but you did. I learned from the best, I said softly. Destroy him, Victoria said. Legally, financially, socially. Make him understand that betrayal has consequences. And Elena, when you need a character witness in court, call me. I'll be there. When Marcus returned from Boston on Sunday evening, he was in an exceptionally good mood. He kissed me on the cheek, told me the business trip had gone well, and asked what was for dinner like nothing had changed. I made his favorite, pan-seared salmon with roasted asparagus, and I watched him eat while I planned his demolition. Did you get the papers? He asked casually, spearing a piece of fish. I did, I replied, taking a sip of wine. And? He was trying to sound concerned, but I could see the anticipation in his eyes. He wanted me to be broken, to be desperate. I'm going to need some time to process everything, I said quietly. This is a lot, Marcus. He reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Take all the time you need. I'm here for you during this transition. Transition, like I was a company being restructured, not a wife being discarded. I appreciate that, I said, and I meant it. Every word of false sympathy from his mouth was ammunition for Rachel Morrison. On Monday morning, I met Rachel at her office in Midtown Manhattan. She was a woman in her 50s with steel gray hair and a reputation that made opposing counsel physically uncomfortable. Her office walls were covered with framed magazine articles. The divorce lawyer who never loses, Manhattan's most feared attorney, the woman who makes cheating husbands pay. Let's go to war, Rachel said, sliding a 300-page response petition across her desk. I read through it, and with every page I felt something inside me strengthen. Rachel hadn't just responded to Marcus's petition, she'd eviscerated it. She detailed every hidden asset, every shell company, every fraudulent transfer. She'd included the audio recording of Marcus and Amber, She'd subpoenaed his bank records, his business accounts, his text messages, his emails. She'd filed motions to freeze every asset Marcus thought he'd hidden, citing financial fraud and dissipation of marital assets. And then came the final section, the one that made me smile for the first time in weeks. Rachel had filed a separate civil suit against Marcus for fraudulent misrepresentation, breach of fiduciary duty, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. She was seeking not just equitable distribution, she was seeking punitive damages. If we won, Marcus wouldn't just lose half of everything, he'd lose everything. This is brilliant, I breathed. This is justice, Rachel corrected. Sign here, here, and here. I signed. And just like that, the war was official. The papers were served to Marcus that afternoon while he was at lunch with a client at the Modern, an upscale restaurant in MoMA. James, my private investigator, had arranged for the process server to approach Marcus's table directly, interrupting his meal and handing him the documents in front of his client and half of Manhattan's real estate elite. I wasn't there, but James had positioned himself 3 tables away and recorded the whole thing. Marcus's face went from confusion to shock to rage in the span of 30 seconds. He tried to maintain composure, but his client, a wealthy developer from Dubai, excused himself quickly, clearly uncomfortable. Marcus sat alone at the table, flipping through page after page of the petition, his face growing paler with each revelation. He called me 16 times that afternoon. I didn't answer. He came home at 6 p.m., slamming the door so hard the windows rattled. Elena, he roared, where are you? I was in the living room, calmly reading a book. I looked up as he stormed in, his face twisted with fury. What the hell is this? Fuss! He threw the petition at me, pages scattered across the floor. It's my response to your divorce petition, I said calmly. Did you really think I was going to just accept your terms? You? You recorded me? You spied on me? His voice was shaking. No, Marcus. I listened. There's a difference. Difference. You had your mistress in our home, discussing how you were going to steal my money and have me living in a studio in Queens. I simply documented it. This is illegal. You can't use that recording. Actually, I can. New York is a one-party consent state for recordings. As long as one person in the conversation knows it's being recorded, it's admissible. I didn't record you and Amber. I recorded what I overheard in my own home. Perfectly legal. Marcus's hands were clenching and unclenching. For a moment, I wondered if he might actually become violent. But then I saw something else in his eyes, fear. You froze my accounts, he said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. I froze our accounts, I corrected. The ones you were illegally draining. The court agreed with me that there was substantial evidence of asset dissipation. So until the divorce is finalized, neither of us can touch those funds without court approval. You're destroying my business. No, Marcus. You destroyed your business when you stole $800,000 from it to fund your mistress's lifestyle. By the way, how were those conversations with your investors going? His face went completely white. What did you do? I didn't do anything, I said innocently. I simply made sure they had access to the same financial records I did. Transparency is important in business relationships, don't you think? Marcus staggered backward, gripping the back of the sofa. You vindictive bitch. No, I said, standing up and meeting his eyes. I'm a woman who trusted you for 15 years, who built a life with you, who stood by you through every failure and every success. And you repaid me by trying to steal everything I worked for and leave me with nothing. You're not the victim here, Marcus. You're the criminal. He left that night, packed a bag, and walked out without another word. I later found out he went to Amber's apartment in Tribeca, the one I was paying for. The next 6 weeks were a masterclass in legal warfare. Marcus hired an expensive attorney, a man named Gerald Westbrook, who specialized in defending high-net-worth individuals in divorce cases. He was good, but he wasn't prepared for Rachel Morrison. Every motion Gerald filed, Rachel countered with evidence so damning it made his arguments collapse. He tried to claim the shell companies were legitimate business entities. Rachel produced emails showing Marcus explicitly discussing hiding assets from me. He tried to claim Amber was just a business associate. Rachel produced hotel receipts, text messages with explicit content, and restaurant bills for romantic dinners. Gerald tried to have the audio recording thrown out. The judge listened to it in chambers, and not only allowed it but personally commented on the record that Marcus's behavior was morally reprehensible and potentially criminal. But the real turning point came during the deposition. Depositions are supposed to be formal, controlled environments where attorneys ask questions and witnesses provide answers. Marcus's deposition was a public execution. Rachel spent 7 hours methodically dismantling every lie Marcus had constructed. She walked him through every financial transaction, every hidden account, every transfer to Amber. She showed him his own emails, his own text messages, his own bank statements. And with each piece of evidence, Marcus's story fell apart. "Mr. Hale," Rachel said, her voice calm and surgical, "you testified earlier that you never intended to defraud your wife, is that correct?" "Yes," Marcus said tightly. "Then can you explain this email dated March 15, 2025, where you wrote to Amber Sinclair, and I quote, 'Elena is so focused on work she'll never notice the money moving. By the time she realizes what's happening, it'll be too late?'" Marcus's attorney objected, but the damage was done. It was all on the record now. "Can you also explain," Rachel continued, "why you transferred $127,000 from your wife's retirement account to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands registered under the name Hale Enterprises, a company that doesn't appear on any tax return you filed in the last 5 years?" Marcus had no answer. His attorney called for a break. During that break, James texted me with an update that made my heart race. Amber had been arrested. Apparently, the IRS investigation I'd quietly triggered had uncovered not just the money Marcus had given her, but a whole separate scheme where Amber had been running credit card fraud using stolen identities. She'd been doing it for years, and Marcus's money had allowed her to expand the operation. When federal agents raided her apartment, they found evidence linking her to over $2 million in fraudulent charges. Amber, facing serious federal prison time, did what criminals always do when cornered. She flipped on Marcus. She gave prosecutors emails showing that Marcus had known about her credit fraud operation and had actually helped her launder money through his real estate company. She provided text messages where Marcus discussed using her criminal contacts to create fake identities for his shell companies. She handed over everything in exchange for a plea deal. Marcus wasn't just looking at a devastating divorce anymore. He was looking at federal charges. When the deposition resumed, Gerald Westbrook whispered something urgent in Marcus's ear. Marcus's face, already pale, turned gray. Rachel noticed immediately. "Is there something you'd like to share with the court, Mr. Westbrook?" she asked sweetly. Gerald cleared his throat. "My client would like to request a recess to discuss potential settlement options." Rachel smiled. "I think that's a wise decision. If you're loving this story and can't wait to see how this ends, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications for Moments with Her. Drop a comment telling me, do you think Marcus deserves what's coming to him? Next part is going to be explosive. The settlement negotiations happened in Rachel's conference room 3 days later. Marcus looked like he'd aged 10 years. His expensive suit hung on him differently, like he'd lost weight. His eyes were hollow. Amber had been arrested. His investors had filed a lawsuit against him. His business was collapsing. And now, federal prosecutors were building a case that could send him to prison for 20 years. Gerald laid out their offer. Marcus would give me everything. The house, 80% of all liquid assets, his entire stake in the real estate company, and $15,000 a month in permanent maintenance. In exchange, I would agree not to cooperate with the federal investigation or pursue the civil fraud claims. It was everything I could have wanted. I'd won. But sitting there, looking at Marcus across the table, I realized something. Winning wasn't about the money. It wasn't about the house. It was about making sure he understood the magnitude of what he'd done. "No," I said quietly. Everyone looked at me in shock. Rachel, Gerald, even Marcus. "Elena," Rachel said carefully, "this is an excellent offer." "I don't want his money," I interrupted. "I want justice." I turned to Marcus. "You didn't just betray me. You tried to destroy me. You partnered with a criminal, you stole from your investors, you committed fraud. And you did all of it because you thought I was too stupid, too trusting, too in love to notice. Marcus's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. So here's my counteroffer, I continued. You give me the house and 50% of the legitimate assets. Not the stolen ones, not the hidden ones, just the actual marital property. You make a full confession to the federal prosecutors and cooperate with their investigation. You publicly apologize to your investors and make them whole from your personal assets. And you serve whatever prison sentence they give you. That's insane, Gerald sputtered. You're asking him to go to prison. I'm asking him to take responsibility. I shot back. He committed crimes. So Rome, he should face consequences. Marcus finally spoke, his voice hoarse. And if I don't agree, then I give every piece of evidence I have to the prosecutors. I testify against you in court, and I watch as they give you the maximum sentence, and I take you for every penny in civil court afterward. Your choice. The room was silent for a long moment. Then Marcus nodded slowly. I'll do it. Want to see the final confrontation and find out exactly what happens to Marcus? The part is coming next, and trust me, you won't believe how this ends. Subscribe to Moments with Her and drop a like if you're Team Elena all the way. The federal courthouse in Lower Manhattan is an imposing limestone building that's witnessed some of the most significant trials in American history. On a cold morning in late February, it would witness Marcus Hale's complete and total downfall. The plea hearing was scheduled for 10 a.m. I arrived 30 minutes early with Rachel, Victoria, and my best friend Sarah, who'd flown in from Seattle to support me. The courthouse steps were crowded with reporters. Marcus's case had become a media sensation. Real estate developers' double life, the New York Times had called it. From penthouses to prison, read the Post. I wore a navy blue suit, simple pearl earrings, and the same rosewood red lipstick I'd been wearing the day I overheard Marcus's betrayal. I wanted to look strong, unbreakable, because that's what I was. Marcus arrived separately, flanked by Gerald Westbrook and 2 federal attorneys. He looked diminished, smaller somehow. The man who'd once commanded every room he entered now walked with his shoulders hunched, avoiding eye contact with the cameras. Inside the courtroom, I sat in the gallery behind the prosecutor's table. Marcus stood before Judge Patricia Reeves, a no-nonsense jurist known for her harsh sentences in white-collar crime cases. Miss Hale, Judge Reeves said, peering over her reading glasses, you're pleading guilty today to multiple counts of wire fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy. Do you understand that by entering this plea, you're admitting to these crimes and waiving your right to a trial? Yes, Your Honor, Marcus said, his voice barely audible. Speak up, Mr. Hale. Yes, Your Honor, he repeated louder this time. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Diana Ortiz, stepped forward. Your Honor, Mr. Hale's cooperation has been invaluable in uncovering a larger fraud operation. However, the severity of his crimes, stealing from his wife, defrauding his investors of over $3.02 million, and knowingly participating in an identity theft ring, warrants significant prison time. The government recommends 7 years in federal prison, followed by 5 years of supervised release and full restitution to all victims. 7 years. I felt my chest tighten. Part of me had wanted more, but another part of me, the part that had loved him once, felt a strange, hollow sadness. Judge Reeves turned to Marcus. Mr. Hale, do you have anything to say before I accept this plea? Marcus was silent for a moment. Then he turned, and for the first time since entering the courtroom, he looked directly at me. Elena, he said, his voice cracking, I know I can never make this right. I know that what I did was unforgivable. You trusted me, you loved me, and I destroyed that. I destroyed us. He paused, swallowing hard. I don't expect your forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I want you to know that everything you did, exposing me, fighting back, refusing to be a victim, it was the bravest thing I've ever seen. You were always stronger than me. I just didn't want to admit it. The courtroom was completely silent. I felt tears prickling at my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Not here, not now. Judge Reeves accepted the plea. Marcus was remanded into federal custody immediately. As the marshals led him away in handcuffs, he looked back at me one more time. I didn't look away. I watched until the door closed behind him. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed me. Cameras flashed. Microphones were thrust in my face. Ms. Vance, how do you feel about your ex-husband's sentence? Do you think justice was served? What's next for you? Rachel stepped forward, her hand on my shoulder. Miss Vance will not be taking questions at this time. Thank you, but I stopped her. Something inside me needed to speak. I'll answer one question, I said. The reporters went quiet, everyone straining to hear. Justice wasn't just about Marcus going to prison, I said clearly. Justice was about refusing to be silenced. It was about fighting back when someone tried to make me disappear. For anyone watching this who's ever been betrayed, who's ever been underestimated, who's ever been told they're not strong enough to fight back, you are. You're stronger than you know. Don't let anyone steal your voice. The questions erupted again, but Rachel guided me toward the waiting car, and we drove away from the chaos. If this story has inspired you or made you think differently about standing up for yourself, please hit that subscribe button for Moments with Her. Drop a like on this video and tell me in the comments, where are you watching from and what would you have done in Elena's position? The weeks following the plea hearing were strange. The house felt different, emptier, but also lighter. I'd won the divorce settlement, receiving the house, 50% of our legitimate assets, which still amounted to over $2 million after Marcus's restitution payments, and the satisfaction of knowing Marcus would face real consequences for his actions. But winning didn't feel like I thought it would. It didn't feel triumphant or celebratory. It felt like closing a chapter of a book I'd once loved, but that had taken a dark, twisted turn. I threw myself into work, taking on a new consulting role with a startup pharmaceutical company in Boston. The commute was long, but the work was challenging and kept my mind occupied. Sarah came to visit twice, bringing wine and terrible romantic comedies and the kind of friendship that doesn't require words. Victoria called me every Sunday. How are you really doing? She'd ask, and I'd give her honest answers. Some days I was angry, some days I was sad, some days I felt nothing at all. Grief, I learned, doesn't follow a straight line, even when the person you're grieving betrayed you. 3 months after Marcus's sentencing, I received an unexpected letter. It was from Amber Sinclair, forwarded through Rachel's office. But curiosity got the better of me. The letter was handwritten, the penmanship surprisingly elegant for someone who'd spent her life committing fraud. Dear Elena, I know I'm probably the last person you want to hear from. I don't expect you to read this, and I definitely don't expect forgiveness. But I need to say this, even if you tear this letter up the moment you finish it. I was wrong. Not just wrong. I was cruel, calculating, and complicit in hurting someone who never did anything to me. When Marcus approached me with his plan, I didn't think about you as a real person. I thought about money, about the lifestyle I could have, about escaping my own mess of a life. I dehumanized you in my mind because it made it easier to participate in destroying you. But watching what happened, watching you fight back with intelligence and strength, made me realize something. You weren't just Marcus's wife. You were a brilliant, accomplished woman who deserved so much better than what we tried to do to you. I'm serving 6 years in federal prison. I'll be 32 when I get out, with a felony record and no real skills beyond manipulation and theft. I don't know what happens next for me, but I do know that I want to be a different person than the one who helped Marcus betray you. You didn't just save yourself when you fought back. You held up a mirror to me and forced me to see what I'd become. That's a gift, even if it doesn't feel like one. I'm sorry, truly deeply sorry. Amber, I read the letter 3 times. I felt anger, disgust, and then, surprisingly, a small measure of pity. Amber had destroyed her own life chasing money that was never hers. She'd thrown away her 20s for a man who would have discarded her the moment someone younger and more useful came along. I didn't write back. But I didn't throw the letter away either. I filed it in a drawer with all the other documents from the case. A reminder of how far I'd come and how close I'd been to losing everything. By summer, I'd made a decision. The house in Westchester was beautiful, but it was haunted by memories of a marriage that had been built on lies. I put it on the market and bought a brownstone in Brooklyn Heights with a view of the Manhattan skyline. It was smaller, cozier, and entirely mine. I redecorated completely. Bright colors, modern furniture, art from local galleries. I created a home office where I could work overlooking a small garden. I adopted a rescue dog, a golden retriever mix named Charlie who had boundless energy and an uncanny ability to know when I needed comfort. Life started to feel less like survival and more like living. One Saturday in August, I met up with my colleague Jennifer for coffee in Dumbo. We'd worked together for years but had never socialized outside the office. Over iced lattes, she asked the question everyone had been too polite to ask directly. "So, are you dating?" I laughed. "Absolutely not. But when you're ready, and I mean really ready, not just saying you're ready, there's this guy in our contracts department. Divorced mid-40s, loves hiking and has a rescue cat named Professor McGonagall." Professor McGonagall, I raised an eyebrow. He's a Harry Potter nerd. It's adorable. I smiled, taking a sip of my coffee. Maybe, someday, but not today. And that was okay. I didn't need romance to feel complete. I didn't need a partner to validate my worth. I'd spent 15 years defining myself through my relationship with Marcus. And now I was learning to define myself on my own terms. The 1-year anniversary of Marcus's sentencing came and went without fanfare. I didn't mark it on my calendar or acknowledge it in any way. But that evening, Victoria called with unexpected news. "Marcus is being transferred to a minimum security facility," she said. "Good behavior. He's also enrolled in education programs, accounting, business ethics, and therapy." "Good for him," I said, and I meant it. I didn't want Marcus to suffer endlessly. I wanted him to understand what he'd done and become a better person. Whether he would or not wasn't my concern anymore. "There's something else," Victoria continued. "He wrote you a letter. It's been sitting with the prison chaplain because Marcus was afraid to send it. The chaplain called me asking if I thought you'd be receptive." My heart clenched. "What do you think I should do?" "That's entirely up to you, darling. You don't owe Marcus anything. Not forgiveness, not closure, not even acknowledgement. But if you're curious, if you think it might help you heal, then read it. Just know that you're under no obligation whatsoever." I thought about it for 2 days. Then I called the chaplain and agreed to receive the letter. It arrived in a plain white envelope with Marcus's prison ID number stamped on the return address. I made myself a cup of tea, sat in my garden with Charlie at my feet, and opened it. "Elena, I've started this letter 100 times and thrown it away 100 times. I don't know what to say that could possibly matter at this point. But my therapist here says that taking responsibility means being honest, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it won't change anything. I destroyed the best thing in my life because I was a coward. I was terrified of being ordinary, of not being the success story everyone expected me to be. When my business started struggling 3 years ago, instead of telling you, instead of letting you help me like you would have, I started making desperate, terrible decisions. I hid losses. I created fake companies. I lied to investors. And when Amber showed up, she represented an escape from the man I'd become. She didn't know the old me, the failing me. She only saw what I pretended to be. Instead of doing the hard work of fixing myself in our marriage, I convinced myself that starting over with someone new would solve everything. It wasn't until I was sitting in that federal holding cell that I realized I didn't just lose you, I lost myself. The person I became, the liar, the thief, the betrayer, that wasn't who I wanted to be. But I chose it anyway. You deserve so much better than what I gave you. You deserved honesty, partnership, and respect. You deserved a husband who saw your strength as an asset, not a threat. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even know if I deserve the chance to ask for it. But I want you to know that watching you fight back, watching you refuse to be destroyed by what I did, it was the most important lesson I've ever learned. You taught me that integrity matters, that actions have consequences, that strength comes from honesty, not manipulation. I hope you're happy, Elena. I hope you've built a life that brings you joy and peace. You've earned it. Marcus, I read the letter once, then carefully folded it and placed it in the drawer with Amber's letter. I didn't cry. I didn't feel angry. I felt closure. Marcus had apologized, but more importantly, he'd acknowledged the truth. That was all I'd ever really wanted. for him to see me as a person he'd hurt, not an obstacle he'd failed to remove. This is the moment where I want to pause and say thank you. Thank you for watching this entire journey with me. If this story resonated with you, if it made you think about your own strength, your own worth, please subscribe to Moments with Her. Hit that like button and share this video with someone who needs to hear this message. And drop a comment below telling me, where are you watching from, and what's one thing you're taking away from Elena's story? 2 years after the divorce was finalized, I was invited to speak at a conference for women in finance. The topic was resilience in the face of adversity. I almost declined. Public speaking about my personal life felt exposing, but Rachel, who'd become a genuine friend, convinced me. Your story matters, Elena, she'd said. Not because it's dramatic or sensational, but because you fought back using your intelligence, your skills, and your courage. Women need to hear that. So I stood on that stage in front of 300 women and told my story. Not all of it. Some details were too personal, too raw. But I told them about discovering Marcus's betrayal, about the moment I chose strategy over emotion, about using my skills as a CFO to unravel his scheme, about refusing to be a victim. When I finished, the room was silent for a heartbeat. Then the applause started. Not polite golf clap applause, but thunderous, standing ovation applause. Women were crying. Women were nodding. Women were nodding. Women were seeing themselves in my story. Afterward, dozens of women approached me. They told me their own stories of betrayal, of financial abuse, of being underestimated and undervalued. They thanked me for showing them that fighting back was possible. One woman, probably in her 60s, gripped my hand tightly. My husband died last year, she said, and I discovered he'd been hiding money from me for decades. I thought I was going crazy. But hearing your story, hearing that you used your skills to protect yourself, it gave me permission to do the same. I hired a forensic accountant. I found $900,000 he'd hidden in offshore accounts. I just wanted to say thank you. That moment, that connection made everything worth it. The pain, the betrayal, the brutal legal battle. If my story could help even one woman recognize her own strength, then Marcus's betrayal had inadvertently given me a purpose. 3 years after the divorce, I was genuinely happy. Not I'm fine, really happy, but deeply authentically content with my life. I had meaningful work, close friendships, a home I loved, and a sense of self that was unshakable. And yes, eventually I started dating. The contracts guy with Professor McGonagall turned out to be charming and kind. We dated for 8 months before realizing we were better as friends. Then I met David, an environmental lawyer who made me laugh and never once made me feel like I needed to be anything other than exactly who I was. It wasn't a fairy tale romance. It was something better, real, honest, and built on mutual respect. Marcus was released from federal prison after serving 5 years with good behavior. I heard through Victoria that he moved to Portland, Oregon, took a job in construction, and was rebuilding his life quietly, away from the New York real estate world that had once been his kingdom. I didn't reach out. He didn't reach out. We existed in separate universes now, connected only by a shared past. One evening, as I sat on my Brooklyn brownstone stoop watching the sunset paint the Manhattan skyline in shades of gold and pink, I realized something profound. Marcus didn't steal my happiness. He tried, but he failed. I had taken back my power, my money, my dignity, and my future. I had refused to be erased, and in doing so, I discovered that I was so much stronger than I'd ever imagined. The woman who'd searched for a lipstick and found a betrayal was gone. In her place was someone wiser, fiercer, and unshakably resilient. I was Elena Vance. I was a survivor. I was a fighter, and I was free. Thank you so much for watching this entire story. If Elena's journey inspired you, please subscribe to Moments with Her for more powerful stories of resilience and strength. Hit that like button and leave a comment below. Where are you watching from, and what's your biggest takeaway from this story? Your support means everything. Until next time, remember, you are stronger than you know, and you deserve to fight for yourself. I'll see you in the next video.